Hello and welcome back to another fanfic reading, a very lemony one. Last time, well, I explained how dirty it is and whose dirty mind it was that was writing this, so I'll go get right to it again. Chapter 2, Mikan's Plan. It's been about 2 weeks since I realized that I was in love with Rito. I also seem to be masturbating every time I'm in the bath alone, and just like the first time I did it, I always have Rito in my thoughts. But lately, it feels like he and I don't hang out as much as we used to. I'm not sure when it started, but it might have been when Lala first arrived at our house. It felt like Rito was getting farther and farther away from me. I had to stop before I completely lose him. Mikan began to pace back and forth in the room as she tried to decide how to approach Rito. She didn't think it was going to be as hard as she thought it was, but ever since she developed these romantic feelings for her brother, it became harder to even look at him square in the face. Every time he would even look in her direction, she would just turn her head to the side and avoid his gaze that made her face flush every time. Whenever he would brush his shoulder past her, her whole body would tense up and feel so warm that her breathing would get heavy. Of course, Rito was too preoccupied with Lala's shenanigans that he wouldn't even take notice of the sudden change in his little sister. Rito was as dense as any boy can get, or maybe even worse. But there are some moments when he isn't. Those moments are never toward Mikan. All I do are either Haruna-chan or even sometimes Lala. Mikan stopped her pacing and looked down on the wooden floor of her room as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. She narrowed her eyes and put on a small frown as she remembered the times before Lala even arrived in their home. Back then it was just Rito and herself. Mikan didn't have these feelings during that time, but began to wonder what might have happened if she did. Damn, frickin'. Give me a moment. Okay. Where was I? Okay, would Rito have noticed her feelings? Mikan shook her head. No way, she thought to herself before sighing, and then turning her attention to the items in her hands. She managed to get tickets to the movie Rito was dying to see, and she even managed to get two, for Rito and herself. She knew Rito wouldn't see this as a date, but she would, and that was fine with her. As long as it was just Rito and herself, that would be all she wanted. However, knowing Lala, she would probably want to join them and use any one of her tools to get herself a ticket or find a way into the movie theater. Mikan loved Lala as a friend, but there were times when even she got annoyed, especially when she would get close to Rito. It even annoyed Mikan every time she caught Lala naked in Rito's bed. She knew Rito wasn't the type of person to allow Lala to sleep with him, but she wondered every time if anything really happened. But every time, she would always remember how bad Rito was with seeing any girl naked, so nothing seemed to have happened between the two. At least that's what she thought. A sound knock on her door awakened Mikan from her thoughts as she turned to face the door and hid the tickets behind her back as she called out to the person behind the door to enter. Come in! To her surprise, Rito was the person who knocked. Immediately, Mikan turned her head to avoid his face. Rito noticed this and frowned. Mikan? Rito stuttered, keeping his frown on his face. What is it? Mikan answered in an uncaring tone, which made her insides feel bad at the way she was talking to the brother she loved. Did I do something wrong? Rito suddenly asked as Mikan turned to face him, blinking at him. No, why? She asked as Rito turned his head to the side and rubbed the back of his head. It's nothing, he began. It's just that you seem to be avoiding me every time I look at you or even talk to you. Mikan looked at her brother and frowned. She forgot about how Rito must have felt whenever she turned her head to the side or just walked away from him. She knew Rito never wanted her to be angry at him. He never wanted to see her cry or get hurt. He would always do his best to make her happy, and that was one of the reasons why she fell in love with him. No, I'm not angry at you. Rito sighed in relief and smiled, knowing he didn't do anything that made Mikan upset with him. Mikan's face turned red when Rito continued to stare at her, causing her to turn her head slightly. Rito blinked at her in confusion. He didn't know she was hiding something behind her back, and his curiosity arose. Mikan, what are you doing hiding behind your back? Mikan froze as she began to fidget with the tickets behind her, and her face turned as red as it could get, before she turned toward her brother and took a big gulp before showing Rito the tickets. She found herself and flushed a much deeper red as she hid her eye from Rito on her bangs and began to shake slightly. These are the tickets to that movie you wanted to see. She watched Rita's eyes widen, making Mika feel less nervous and hopeful. I want to see if you would like to see it with me. She closed her eyes, waiting for Rito's answer. She didn't dare open her eyes until she heard a response from Rito's mouth. She hoped it was going to be a yes. Really, Mikon? Rito's sign burst out as Megan could only nod in slight shock as he suddenly rushed over to her and took both her hands, which held the tickets, into his own hands, causing Mika to blush much deeper than a person can probably go. Is it really for that movie? Rito asked as Megan could only nod and stare at him in shock as her face was as red as a tomato. She replied. She felt her hands get really warm from his touch. A lot warmer than when Rito would brush against her shoulder. She liked the feeling of his skin against hers, and then before she knew it, she suddenly felt wet in between her legs. She let out a slight moan, which confused Rito, causing his eyebrows to raise. Is everything alright, Mikon? He asked her as she suddenly realized she moaned without noticing herself that she did so. Snapping back to reality, oh, there goes gravity, and tried to prevent the urgent feeling to suddenly attack Rito and then start to No. She thought, trying to prevent such thoughts, as Rito just continued to look at her with confused and slight worried eyes. I know, Mikon. Mikon stopped shaking and just chuckled nervously as Rito was seriously worried about her and the way she was acting. Mika then looked back down at Rito's hands over hers and blushed deeper. Rito, following her gaze, blushed lightly himself as he let go of her hands. Sorry, Mikon, he exclaimed, thinking she was going to get mad at him. But she was feeling the exact opposite. As soon as Rito's hand slapped hers, she felt disappointed that the warmth was gone. Rito looked at his sister in confusion and didn't understand why she was so angry with him. Mikon? He started to say. But then Mikon looked up at him, put on a fake smile, which Rito didn't recognize. I'm fine, Rito. The movie starts at 4, so we'll leave then, okay? She told him, as Rito gave her a warm smile, which seemed to melt her heart as he nodded. Okay, can't wait, he replied before leaving the room, leaving Mikon by herself in her room. She quietly walked toward the door and switched her lock on, so that no one would come in abruptly and then place the tickets in the nearby drawer, before slowly walking over to her bed. She slowly climbed into her bed and slowly raised her head on her pillow, and then raised her lower half up. She then slowly moved her fingers to zip on her jeans and slowly glided it down, revealing her now wet, white-colored panties. Moaning slightly into her pillow, she slowly slid her fingers into her panties and began to play around with her vagina. She slowly rubbed her fingers against the walls of her vagina. She moaned into the pillow to prevent any loud moans from escaping her mouth and alerting anyone who walked by her room. She closed her eyes tightly. She could never get used to the feeling of playing with herself. Rito, she moaned out his name once again, as her brother's warm, smiling face appeared in her thoughts as she began to move her fingers into and out of her pussy. Rito. Suddenly, her mind began to imagine herself getting fucked by her brother to let her. At her, it felt like the real thing. She wanted him oh so badly, but she knew Rito would never do anything like this with her. In fact, she wished that she wasn't his sister. That way, she would want to have sex with him every single minute of each day. Oh boy! However, she couldn't because she knew it was wrong and he didn't see her that way. She hated being his sister so much. Maybe that's why she started calling by his first name, because she didn't want him to be her brother. She wanted him to be more than that. She wanted to be his lover. She wanted to have sex with, let him caress her all over her body. She wanted to marry him, have children with him, and spend the rest of her life with him. However, in reality, she knew all those dreams couldn't come true. Rito, she screamed? I think it's supposed to say screamed. She screamed to the pillow as she climaxed and began to suck both her panties and jeans. She could never get tired of her climax that felt so good whenever she thought of Rito. She wanted him. She didn't care how he did or she did it or when, he did it or when, but she wanted to have sex with him. She would even allow him to come inside her if that's what it took. As her orgasm died down, she lowered her bottom half to rest on her bed as she felt her panties and jeans begin to get wet with her vaginal secretion as she breathed heavily into her pillow. She wanted Rito, but she knew it wasn't possible. As she cried into her pillow at the thought, she knew that today was going to be special, and she would do anything to make sure it stayed that way. She just wanted it to be her and Rito, and no matter what, she would make sure it stays that way. She wanted him to know her feelings. She wanted him, but she knew it was going to happen unless a miracle happens. Why? Because it was taboo. To be continued. And to continue it shall for like 2 more chapters. And let's see how these go from there.